Hello! Today we are going to be solving percent problems using equations. We have already in the past solved percent problems using proportions, and now we're just going to use a little bit of algebra in order to find the percent of a number. I personally prefer to use this method, but some people like to use the proportions. I think it's important for you to understand that both work, but my preference is to use this method. I think it's a little faster. Plus, in reality, when I'm at the grocery store or when I'm at JCPenney's or wherever and I'm trying to figure out a discount, like if something's 35% off and I want to know how much those Fiestaware plates are going to cost me, I use this method because it works well on a calculator and it's the fastest and easiest approach. So this is going to be really the method you're probably going to want to use most when you're finding discount, tax, or tip. So it's a good way to learn. So our topic is solving percent problems using equations. We're on page 77 and 78, and you only have one little piece of paper to put in. The essential question is, how can I use an equation to find the percent of a number? And you'll notice that on this paper you have a little bit of writing. So we're going to read that. I'm going to read it out loud. You can read it on yours. The copy is not fantastic, so I will tell you what words got the copier kind of messed up. When you are solving percent problems with equations, the way the problem is worded will give you clues as to how to set up the equation. Look at the examples below to see how you can, and this is what's in that little box, translate words into mathematical equations. It says, translate words into mathematical, and I'm just going to abbreviate it, mathematical equations. Okay, so we have some cue words or clue words that help us to translate. And the first thing that you're going to see is whenever you see the word what, in this case it's what number. What number? It's telling you that we're asking a question. We don't know what number it is. Therefore, if it's an unknown or a what, it is considered a variable. So we're going to give it a variable name. Now, a variable name can be any letter you really want to use. I, in this case, use the letter N. So whenever you see that what, you're going to say, I don't know it, so I'm going to pop a variable in. Okay? When you see the word is, we talked about this before. Does anybody remember what is means? Raise your hand if you can tell me. Yes, Jacqueline?
Is means equals?
It always will mean equals. So if it is something, it equals something. Okay? Now, 20%. Now, when I have a 20%, percents are kind of a difficult thing to use when you're actually doing mathematical processes. So we have to convert them into something that's more manageable or usable. That's why we learned how to convert between percentage, decimals, and fractions, because you need to be able to use whichever one you need at the time. So I typically will translate it or transfer it into a decimal because, like I said, I think for me that's kind of the easiest, my go-to, especially, like I said, when I'm at the grocery store, not at the grocery store, you don't usually get discounts at the grocery store, but when I'm at the mall and I see something as a percentage off and I just want to plug those numbers into my calculator, decimals are easier for me to use. But you can also use a fraction. Now remember, when we're converting from a percent to a decimal, you move your decimal place how many times? Anybody and everybody who say it. How many times do you move it to the left? Two, right? You start here and you go once, twice, and you get 2/10 or 20/100. Now, as a fraction, I can make this into a fraction as well by putting the 20 over 100, and I can simplify that to 2/10 or 1/5. So I can also make it into a, and I'm actually going to go bigger on this section because that might make it easier for you to see. You can also make it into a fraction, and I can show you later how you can utilize that. But the thing to remember is when you see that percentage, you need to convert it. Okay? So now we know what number is our variable, is our equal sign. We convert your percent. Now, of. What does of mean to us? What does of mean? Isaac?
Multiplication.
Multiplication, that is correct. So when you see the word of, you know, I'm going to multiply. And I'm going to multiply that converted decimal by, now here's the thing, it gives you the number 30. There's no words, there's no signs, it's just the number 30. And guess what all you have to do? Bring it down, okay? So I just drop that number down. I'm going to say drop it down. So now I have the variable n equals 20 hundredths times 30. It's now in the form of a math equation. We got numbers, and I know us mathematicians, we love numbers. We get so excited when we have numbers, and we get quite depressed when we have words. So we're golden now. So now you solve the equation, okay? So to solve it, you would do 0.20, or 20 hundredths, times 30. 0 times 0 is 0. 0 times 0 is 0. Add our placeholder. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 3 is 6. We add them up. Now we're not done because we have to count our decimal places and move them back in. I have 1, 2 here, 1, 2 here, and I end up with 6. Well, looky there, I got the right answer. So 6 is the value of n. So 6 is 20% of 30. So if I figure what 30% or 30 and I want to get 20% of it, I'm going to get 6. Now, let's do a little mental math to see if this makes sense. 10% of a number. If I take 10% of a number, I'm going to divide this number by 10, right? So what is 10% of 30? Christian? 3. 10%. I'm looking for 20%, right? So wouldn't it make sense that 20% is just double 10%? It's 2 10%. So you told me that 10% of 30 is 3. What's 2 10%? What's 2 3s? 6. Is that what we got?
Yeah.
We just double checked our work and we're right. So especially when we do our tests, ladies, especially when we do our tests, always double check your work. Check to see, does this actually seem reasonable? If it doesn't seem reasonable, like let's say I got 20 is 20% of 30. Well, if I know 10% of 30 is 3, that's not reasonable. I need to go back and double check my work. I messed up somewhere. All right, let's do another example. Let's look at this side. This one is in a slightly different order. It's not, and that's the thing. When you learn the translation words, it doesn't matter what order they come in. You can still solve it. On this one, you have 6 is. Now remember, 6 is by itself. So what do we do with it? We just drop it down, right? Is, what does is mean?
Equals.
Equals. What percent? I have a what word. What do I need to put in there?
Variable.
Variable. Very good. What percent is a variable of? What is of, class?
Multiplication.
Good. And we got a 30 here. Is there anything with it? No. You just drop it down. So now I've got the equation 6 equals n times 30. So we're going to use a little bit of algebra to solve this. Yes?
Why didn't you just divide 30 by 6?
You will be dividing 30 by 6, but we need to show how that works algebraically. Because it's not always going to be this simple. Let's say that we had 6 is what percent of, let's say 22. Would that have been as easy for you to do? No. So you're doing the right thing because you're doing the inverse operation, but let's show how we do that algebraically. You'll see, you're going to do the same thing. Okay? And honestly, if it was a matter of you needed to get the problem, if I was at the store, I would do what you're doing. But if I'm doing this on a math test and I have to show what I'm doing or how that I know the steps, I'm going to do it algebraically. Okay, so you've got 6 equals n times 30. If I do this, I need to get this n by itself. To get the n by itself, you do the opposite operation. So what are we doing to the n? We are multiplying the n times what, class? 30, right? So what's the opposite, Levi, of multiplying by 30? Dividing by 30. So I'm going to divide this side by 30. And remember, whatever you do on one side, you got to do on the other side. Okay? So these cross out and I end up with my n all by itself and happy. Now I need to simplify this fraction. What is 6/30 simplified?
315, but we could go lower.
You can go lower. Try going, you said 315, but I think we can go lower. So see if you can get even lower.
1/5?
1/5, because 6 divided by 6 is 1, 30 divided by 6 is 5. You were correct, but you can keep going. So 1/5. Now, we know that 6 is 1/5 of 30. Now, but is that what it's asking up here? Is it asking what fraction that is?
No.
No, it's asking what? What
Percent.
So what do we need to do? Levi. Change the fraction to a percent. So if you have 1/5 as a percent, you would do 1 divided by 5. You can't go in. Add your decimal, add your 0. 5 goes into 10 twice. You now have your decimal. Now you have your decimal. We convert the decimal to a percent by moving the decimal place 2 times to the right. It goes 1, 2, and you end up with 20%. 6 is 20% of 30. Okay? So, some notes for us to write down, guys. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see my notes. Whoop, wrong way. Stretch it out. Okay. First thing, when you have what there, whether it is what number or percent, you need to write in the variable. Okay, it could be n, it could be x, I don't care. I usually use n, I don't know why. It's just my go-to. Should use an e for angle. Then, what about when we have the word is? Is equal sign. Okay? Then we have of. Of is multiply. So your steps are, first step, translate. Your first step is translating the words we know to mathematical symbols. I'll abbreviate to math symbols to create an equation. Okay? Second step, fill in numbers. And remember to convert. And you want to convert percentages to decimals or fractions. And finally, you're going to solve for the variable. And to do that, remember, get the variable alone, which, by the way, we call isolate. Use the opposite operation. Sorry. And we call that the inverse. I'm running out of room, sorry. And don't forget, if needed, convert back fractions or decimals to percents. Okay. Now, for time's sake, if you need to watch these notes again to fill in the blanks, you can do so. I'm going to go to the practice problems just so we don't run out of time. Okay. So, all right. So I'm going to page 77. Your first practice problem is what number is 68% of 60? All right. Who can tell me what do I write for what number? Nicole.
A variable.
Can I use n for Nicole?
Yeah.
So a variable. What do I write for is? Christian.
Is an equal sign.
Good. What do I write for the 68%? Can somebody convert that to a decimal for me? Jacqueline?
0.68.
0.68. Okay. What do I write for the of? Elizabeth?
The multiplication.
Multiply, and I just bring the 60 down, right? So now I would multiply 60 times 0.68, and that's going to get my answer to solve. All right, guys, I'm going to write one more practice problem before you leave, okay? Number 2, write this down before you go. What number is 20%? Hey, Ray, I'm still recording notes. Please don't be rude. What number is 20% of 55? Okay? I want you guys to try that on your own using the translation. Have a great day.